Have you ever felt like you're doing all the right things, but nothing seems to move? You study, you practice, you stay consistent, and yet the results don't show. Not for months, maybe even years. That's the invisible part of the feedback loop. The long, quiet phase where growth is happening underneath, but not yet visible on the surface. Welcome, everyone, to The Long Game. I'm Nathan, and it's great to have you here again. Thank you, truly, to every listener and every subscriber. I read all your comments, each one. Even if I don't always get to reply, life and little kids can be quite the marathon. I see them, and I'm grateful. Today's episode is about the long feedback loop of success. How growth in real life rarely follows instant signals, and how people who master feedback over time end up compounding far beyond those who chase quick results. Let's start with something simple. In any system, whether it's your body, your career, or your investments, feedback is the mechanism that tells you what's working and what's not. It's how the world talks back. But here's the catch. In meaningful pursuits, that feedback often comes very slowly, too slowly for our impatient brains to feel rewarded. When you go to the gym once, nothing changes. When you save $100, it feels pointless. When you publish your first article, no one reads it. And so, most people quit, not because they're not good enough, but because they misread the delay in feedback as failure. Real growth lives in the lag. The longer the delay, the deeper the roots. Think of a bamboo tree. It spends years growing underground before it even breaks the surface. But once it does, it shoots up meters within weeks. Its early years are invisible, yet essential. That's how real success loops work. They don't reward you right away. They test your patience, your belief, your willingness to stay when the applause is silent. And that's why most people never see their own long feedback loop complete. They keep switching paths, chasing faster validation. But the ones who do stay, they start to notice small adjustments compound into big transformations. A writer who keeps publishing quietly for years starts to feel the rhythm of language, that invisible feedback the audience never said, but the writer absorbed through practice. A business owner who keeps refining the product begins to sense what customers truly need, not through surveys, but through lived iteration. And a long-term investor learns to stay calm when markets swing, because he knows feedback from a single year doesn't define the outcome of a decade. All of them are guided by feedback, but none of them expect it to be quick. The best players in any domain operate on feedback loops so long that they look like they're not reacting at all. But they are. They're just patient enough to let the full signal come through. So if you're in that phase where effort feels unrewarded, remember you might be inside the quiet half of your loop, the part where reality is still measuring, still adjusting, still aligning with you. Your job isn't to demand faster feedback. It's to stay long enough for the real feedback to arrive. And when it does, it doesn't whisper. It compounds. In the next part, we'll dive into how to design your life around these feedback loops so you can make progress visible, even when results aren't. Stay tuned. You're listening to The Long Game. I'm Nathan, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to The Long Game. I'm Nathan, and in this part, we're going to unpack how to build your own long feedback loop so you can actually feel progress, even when the world hasn't yet clapped for you. Let's start with something counterintuitive. Most people think feedback means opinions. They wait for others to tell them whether they're good or bad, right or wrong. But the most powerful feedback doesn't come from people. It comes from reality, from the silent signals in results, patterns, and emotions that accumulate over time. For example, when you're learning a new skill, you don't need applause. You need patterns. Notice what drains you, what energizes you, what gets easier each week without you realizing it. That's the real loop talking back. See, the world is always giving feedback. It just doesn't always do it in words. A good day is feedback. A bad week is feedback. A moment of calm where you used to panic, that's feedback too. But because we live in a fast dopamine economy, we've trained ourselves to only notice feedback that's loud. Likes, follows, promotions, grades. The problem is, those are external signals, and they often come too late or never. The real feedback you can trust is the quiet, internal kind, the one that comes from iteration. When you've done something hundreds of times, you start to feel when it's right. Your intuition becomes data. Let me give you an example. A musician doesn't need to ask if a note sounds wrong. Their fingers know. A craftsman doesn't need a checklist. Their hands remember. A long-term investor doesn't panic when prices fall. They've lived enough cycles to know that volatility isn't risk. That kind of confidence isn't built overnight. It's a loop trained over years, and the longer you stay in it, the sharper your signal becomes. So how do you design a long feedback loop? Let's break it into 3 layers: awareness, reflection, and iteration. First, awareness. You can't improve what you don't notice. You have to build sensitivity to your own actions. Track what you do, not to judge yourself, but to see your patterns clearly. Every repetition leaves a trace. Second, reflection. Once a week, once a month, look back. Don't ask, did I win? Ask, what did I learn? The loop doesn't reward results, it rewards insights. The more you extract meaning from your own data, the faster you adapt. And finally, iteration. Act again, slightly better than before. That's how small loops feed the long one. Every little test adds a pixel to the bigger picture. When you stack those cycles, awareness, reflection, and iteration, you're no longer guessing your way through life. You're running experiments. You're compounding knowledge. But there's a secret ingredient most people miss: patience with the lag. In a long feedback loop, there's always a delay between what you do and what you see, between cause and effect, between planting and harvest. And that's the hardest part, because your brain hates silence. It craves confirmation. It wants proof now. But success doesn't talk in real time. It talks in echoes. When you start saving, your account doesn't thank you, but 10 years later, your freedom will. When you start practicing discipline, your habits won't applaud, but your future self will. When you keep showing up, day after day, quietly improving, you may feel invisible, but that's just the long feedback loop doing its work beneath the surface. So maybe the right question isn't, why haven't I succeeded yet? Maybe it's, what feedback am I not patient enough to hear? Every skill, every business, every relationship is governed by feedback loops of different lengths. Short ones teach you tactics. Long ones teach you truth. And those who master the long loops, they don't just get better results, they get better judgment. They stop reacting to noise and start responding to signals that compound across time. So if you're on that quiet path, keep going. You're not stuck, you're sinking. Reality is calibrating around your effort. That's the long game. In our final part, we'll talk about what happens after the loop, how to recognize when the world finally talks back, and how to use that signal to accelerate your next stage of growth without losing patience or humility. Stay with me. You're listening to The Long Game. I'm Nathan, and we'll continue right after this.
Welcome back to The Long Game. I'm Nathan, and today we're arriving at the third and final part of our journey through the long feedback loop of success. If you've come this far, you're probably someone who already knows the taste of patience, the quiet kind that doesn't get applause, but keeps you in the game anyway. And in this final part, I want to talk about what happens after the long loop pays off, when feedback finally comes back around, when the signal returns to you stronger than ever, and how to handle that moment without losing the discipline that built it. When success starts to show up, the feedback loop changes its tone. At first, it was silent, uncertain, full of doubt. Then suddenly, it speaks, with validation, recognition, opportunity. And here's the paradox. The moment you finally get external feedback is also the moment it can distort your internal compass. If you're not careful, you start chasing the feedback itself instead of the growth it represents. The applause feels good, the followers increase, money arrives, doors open, and you start adjusting your work to get more of that response instead of listening to the deeper, slower signal that got you here in the first place. That's why many people plateau right after they make it. Their feedback loop shortens. They go from experimenting to performing, from exploring to maintaining, from being curious to being careful. But the masters, the ones that keep compounding, they treat every new wave of success as just another loop. They don't let the feedback end the cycle. They let it refine the next one. Think of it this way. The long feedback loop is never one big circle. It's a spiral, a loop that climbs upward each time it completes. Every turn gives you a clearer signal, a more refined intuition, and a stronger foundation for what's next. The first loop teaches survival. The next teaches mastery. And beyond that, it teaches stewardship, how to use your success to help others build theirs. That's why mentors are so rare and valuable. They're not just successful. They've completed multiple loops. They've failed, waited, learned, and succeeded enough times to understand the rhythm beneath it all. And when you learn from someone like that, you don't just get advice. You inherit pattern recognition. Their ability to sense where you are in your own loop and what signal you should be listening to right now. Let's talk about that for a second. How to recognize where you are in your loop. If you're in the early phase, it feels like shouting into the void. You're working, but nothing's echoing back yet. Your job there is endurance. If you're in the middle phase, you start getting mixed signals, some wins, some confusion. Your job there is calibration. And if you're in the later phase, the world starts responding. People notice. Opportunities appear. That's when your job
becomes humility. Because the loop doesn't end with success, it resets. The moment you master one skill, the universe quietly invites you to start the next one from zero. That's what makes long-term success so rare. It requires the courage to be a beginner again, over and over. Let's ground this in something real. Think about a great investor. After years of reading, losing, learning, and refining judgment, they finally master their process, and then the market changes. New technologies appear, new players rise. The old patterns stop working. At that moment, they have two choices: cling to the old loop or begin a new loop. The best investors choose the latter. They accept that their edge decays unless renewed. They become students again, quietly, deliberately, humbly. Or think about an artist. Their early years are pure experimentation. They paint, fail, explore. Then the world finally recognizes their style. And that's when the real test begins. Do they repeat what sells? Or do they keep evolving, risking obscurity to stay alive creatively? The long feedback loop demands evolution. Not just consistency, but reinvention with awareness. So, how do you stay grounded as your loops get longer, as the feedback grows louder, as the stakes get higher? You build inner reference points, metrics that only you can measure. How deeply you focus, how honestly you reflect, how well you sleep with your effort, how much you still enjoy the process when no one's watching. Those are your private indicators, the real dashboard of the long game. When the external feedback explodes, good or bad, return to those. They keep you aligned with your purpose while you keep looping upward. Because here's the truth: success isn't a destination, it's a rhythm. You act, you learn, you adapt, you repeat. And every time you come full circle, you come back wiser, sharper, calmer. You realize feedback isn't something the world gives you. It's something you earn by staying long enough for reality to trust you with its lessons. So wherever you are right now, whether the loop feels silent, messy, or loud, keep listening. The signal is there. It's just taking the long route back to you. And when it finally arrives, don't just celebrate it. Use it to start the next cycle of growth. That's the long feedback loop of success. And that's how you keep compounding in skill, in wisdom, and in peace. Thank you for being here, for spending your time listening, reflecting, and walking this long game with me. Every message, every comment, I see them all. Even if I can't reply to every one, please know how deeply I appreciate you. Until next time, stay patient, stay curious, and stay in your loop. I'm Nathan, and this is The Long Game.